Welcome. You have entered the realm of 1111 Talk Radio. Your host is Simran. It's time to discover your own language with the universe. Empower yourself, broaden your mind, open your heart, and discover who you are. Now, here's your host, Simran.
Do you believe that we have free will or that there's destiny? Are things fated in our lifetime? Or is this just some random experiment where things happen all over the place, all over the times? Well, when I look back at my life, I see a lot of dots that connect. And as you know, I wrote the book Conversations with the Universe, which was my discovery of all of the signs and symbols and synchronicities that occur in our life, and how I truly discovered that the universe had my back, even when I didn't know it did. And the most significant part of that discovery came through a relationship. I had an arranged marriage, and in that arranged marriage, it was wrought with a lot of turmoil. There was so much going on inside of there that ultimately I knew I had to leave, that I had grown as far as I could grow within the relationship. And the next step would have to be on my own, learning a sense of independence and a sense of voice and grounding that I just couldn't seem to achieve within that relationship. It's interesting who crosses our lives and our paths, and which ones that we might call soulmates or karmic relationships or destined twin flames. Do you know the difference? Are you aware? Well, that's the conversation that we're having today. And I am delighted to bring my guest, Kate Rose, on because she is the author of Written in the Stars, The Astrology of Soulmate, Karmic, and Twin Flame Relationships. And let me share just a little bit with you. Dear one, the universe has always had your back. I know it has not been easy. That love has only equaled confusion. And that amid the strongest storms, you have doubted yourself. You have doubted your own magnificence, your own divine essence. You forget that you are part of a universe as much as the stars are, as much as the sun that beats down hot on your bare skin. But it is time to come home to yourself, to return to yourself. The journey of love is designed to do precisely this. To help you see that every love, no matter how little time it lasted, no matter how much it broke your heart, was intended to help you become more of you than you have ever been. This is from Kate's book, Written in the Stars, The Astrology of Soulmate, Karmic, and Twin Flame Relationships. She's also the author of You Only Fall in Love 3 Times. As a therapist, relationship expert, spiritual intuitive, and astrologer, Kate uses the stars to help her clients clarify their purpose and recognize the blocks that are keeping them from living the life they are destined to live. She holds an MS in clinical art therapy and writes regular columns for Your Tango, Elephant Journal, and her newsletter, Unedited. She's also the host of Soul Gold Podcast. Welcome, Kate, to 1111 Talk Radio. It is destined that you are here.
Simran, it is such an honor to be here, and I love that you shared some of your own story. That's so much of exactly the work that I do with people.
Well, as I was reading through your book, I was just going, yep. It was fascinating, and I love how you break down the different signs. I love how you are sharing so much about Mercury and Saturn and not just the sun, moon, and rising.
Exactly.
Kind of the global picture that we are, and then how this all comes together. It really is quite fascinating. And so, when individuals are really looking for that right one, or they're in a relationship and not quite sure that it's the right relationship or how to fix something, I was first fascinated by the comment that you made in the book that there are only 3 specific times that we actually fall in love. Can you share a little more about that? And I know that that's actually the title of your previous book as well.
Yes, it is. And that's You Only Fall in Love 3 Times, The Secret Search for Our Twin Flame, because I think so many of us, we don't set off on this journey knowing what it is that we're looking for. In all of my work with people, I discovered that we really only do fall in love 3 times. Perhaps we might love more than 3 times, but really it all comes down to 3 kinds of love. And that represents the soulmate, the karmic relationship, and the twin flame relationship. The soulmate relationship is often one of the first relationships that we get into, not always, but usually. And it's really based in a lot of similarities and sameness, commonalities between how we were raised, our familial beliefs, even perhaps what we look like or what background we came from. And while it's not, let's say, necessarily in many ways bad, nor the person bad many times in the soulmate, it just tends to feel like there's something that's not quite right either. And it takes usually a long period of time to be able to create a separation from the soulmate, because separating from the soulmate is really beginning your own personal spiritual journey. It means that you have set out on this quest for your truth and to figure out who you authentically are in this universe. After we leave the soulmate relationship, we're feeling emboldened by having been able to make this hard and tough decision, and we want to live our life to the fullest. We're looking for passion and excitement and the meaning of life and love and all of the things. And we end up attracting this karmic relationship into our lives. Usually when people meet this person, they originally first think that this is their twin flame because they can't help but recognize that feeling. They can't get enough of one another. It feels like we've known them before, and we have, but the purpose isn't necessarily to last forever. The karmic relationship, a big part of that and purpose, is to help us be able to understand our own personal wounds and conditioning from childhood, generationally even, so that we can heal that and be able to actually not just embody the truth that kind of first emerged after the soulmate, but also be able to have a better understanding of who we are as individuals, so that we can kind of, let's say, lead with our healing adult instead of an inner child or a rebellious teenager. At that point, we're more comfortable being ourselves. We have stepped into our worthiness. We're able to advocate. We're aware of our attachment style or communication style. We know what it is we need, and we're comfortable with ourselves. So many times people will be able to enjoy being alone, many times for the first time in their life. And at that point is usually when we come across that twin flame, whether it's a reconnection with someone from our past when we just weren't necessarily on the same vibration before, or it's someone completely new. And this relationship is one in which the biggest challenge is learning how to receive an easy love, being able to talk through things and have our emotional needs met, and realize that consistency actually is what we've all deserved. And so the twin flame relationship comes in after we've gone through significant periods of our own growth and healing as kind of that reminder that this healthy love always did exist. We just needed to first discover it within ourselves.
That's so beautiful. So when you're saying that you only fall in love 3 times, you're talking about the 3 different aspects of love that we encounter. But an individual could have many more relationships of love than those 3 times. With that said, what if there's a person that just has one relationship and they kind of work their way through that relationship, or they choose to stay in a relationship where they see the differences in their partner, and it's just not a relationship they're going to ever leave. Do they still go through these 3 stages within that relationship, and how do they know if they do, or are they holding themselves back?
Unfortunately, the truth is that they are holding themselves back. Because as humans, with any sort of path that we go through or evolution of the soul, we first need to leave behind what's comfortable. We need to leave behind what's known in order to venture out and discover ourselves. I have spoken with people who have only one relationship. There's one woman in particular that comes to mind. And when she first reached out, she asked, is it possible to have all three in one relationship? And when I went over the astrology of the chart, I could tell that her relationship looked quite karmic, meaning that you could see principles from her parents' charts in her current partners. And you could also see in the chart the difficulties that he was moving through. And in her case, as with so many, it's not necessarily that we know that this person is our forever or that it's a truly healthy, all-encompassing relationship, but that we're afraid. We're afraid of doing something different. We're afraid of disappointing family or what will happen afterward. And with any sort of path and journey, the whole idea is to embrace the fear and not to run from it.
And before people panic and go jump ship.
Please don't. Because, well, the other part is we all also have a different soul purpose. And so what we say this year of, I don't plan on leaving, I'm not leaving. I've spoken with clients who the first time I spoke with them, that was what they said. And then you fast forward 5 years later and suddenly they can't imagine staying and they're a completely different place.
Well, and I also remember reading within your book that when there is someone that feels like they would need to leave because now they've just read it in the book or someone has told them that.
Yes.
They can't really do that either. They can't just decide to leave, right? Why is that?
No, and I love that you brought that up. It's something that I've found that's so important is that there is a difference between making a decision and choice, especially one as significant as leaving a relationship and changing our lives, from the logic of being told that's the right thing or in reading it in a book such as this, versus truly being called to make this decision because you have embodied a new awareness, a new level of growth, a new feeling within yourself. And the reason I say that is that there's so many times I have spoken with someone and they left a previous, let's say, unhealthy relationship or even soulmate relationship because someone else told them that it was unhealthy, that they could do better, that they should choose themselves, and all of these things, even a situation where parents moved someone out of their spousal home. But in these cases, when you make a decision because of somebody else or because you read something or heard something, the thing is that doesn't mean that you've learned the lesson that was associated with that relationship. And so what you will do unconsciously is call in a very similar partner where you'll be faced with the same lesson, except in that sense, there's no one to come and rescue us in those moments, and we have to be the ones to learn the lesson.
You know, I had a teacher years ago that had a saying that I really followed during the most tumultuous time of my arranged marriage. And what she said was, you can't leave until you can stay. And you don't stay until you can leave. She had a way of reversing the two statements. But at that time I knew, as tumultuous as this is, I can't leave until I can stay in it. There's a reason that I'm here. And then it was a point where all of a sudden I knew I got the lesson. I figured out why I'm here, and now it's okay to go. So it's so true.
And it's so important. And many times when I do speak with people in those moments, you know, because in order to learn the lesson, as I'm sure that you went through, and I know I experienced as well, we can't judge ourselves if we're wanting to learn or grow or heal. And so I always advise that we are simply in process. In those moments where we think that we might want to leave a relationship, but we don't know how, or we're scared, it's enough to simply tell ourselves that we're in process, because it helps us not judge ourselves, which allows any other new awareness or lessons learned to be embodied.
So the soulmate relationship is the one that we feel like we can't live without, and it will have its issues. And then the karmic one is the one that helps us heal all of those wounds that we have. Yes?
Yes. In the soulmate relationship, it's more comfortable than a can't live without you. The can't live without you is more the karmic relationship. That's almost where it almost feels like love has become a drug. Individuals are often addicted to each other, even if it's in a painful or unhealthy cycle. The soulmate relationship is simply comfortable, where many times we could say, I could do this the rest of my life, but do I want to?
And do they happen in a certain order?
So most always, very few people, I believe, like I could count on one hand the number of people who did not go in this order of all of those I've ever spoken with. But for the most part, our soulmate always comes first because we're still operating very much under the guise of how we were raised as children. So we are thinking that we're going to kind of fulfill whatever conditions or expectations that our family set, or even repeat the same marriage or relationship that our parents had. So usually the soulmate relationship is first, simply because it's almost like just our personal adult version of whatever we experienced or what we were taught to experience in childhood. The karmic relationship often comes second. In certain cases, some people may have it come first based on what they specifically experienced when they were younger. And the karmic relationship is the one that really just turns our world upside down. It's the one that usually most people want to work the most, but which ultimately is meant to have us kind of be redirected back and do that inner healing work so that we can finally attract a truly healthy love.
And I think the one that's probably most misunderstood, or at least I see the two extremes written about, would be the twin soul, twin flame relationship. What is the true twin flame relationship?
So, and I love that you said even just the drastic differences of writings. And the twin flame, like anything that I say, even this aspect of our awareness and spirituality is that so much as we continue to learn, what we thought once was true changes. And so with all of the original material written about twin flames having been so about 50 years ago, we've learned a great deal. And at the time that twin flames were first written about, no one even knew the term or word of karmic relationship. And so when we're talking about the true twin flame definition, we're looking at this aspect of the highest, healthiest love that two people can experience in a lifetime. And that can only be done once we have moved through certain phases of our own personal evolution, which is learning our truth and being able to heal ourselves, give ourselves what we always needed, love ourselves. And that opens up the door for the twin flame. The twin flame is not the runner and chaser. That's the on again, off again cycle of the karmic relationship. It's not occurring while we're in marriages. It's not something that's lied about. There's not secrecy attached to the twin flames. We're not hiding things. We're not projecting or avoiding, drinking away our worries and ignoring our partner. That's more the karmic. The twin flame is truly two imperfect humans who have done the work to become their version of their best self in that moment. They are willing to grow, they're willing to heal, and they know what it means to show up healthy for themselves, so they're able to do that for a partner.
In my first book, I had a couple of lines that kind of came through me to constantly repeat in that book. And those lines were, "You are not on a journey, you are the journey." And what you've described here as the, movement through these types of relationships, it really does depict that we each are the journey in our experiences. I love how you introduce, and I'm just slightly exposed to astrology, and if you look at most general astrology, they typically talk about sun, moon, rising. You don't hear so much about all of the other stuff at a more basic level. And I was very surprised at quite a few things. And one of those was how you bring in parents' charts, because most people just look at their own chart. And it's quite interesting that relationships have so much to do with our parents' astrological charts.
It's really fascinating. And this quest of mine, the research that I did for about over a decade before writing Written in the Stars, was because of the idea of you only fall in love 3 times, because people wanted to know, but how do you know which love you're in? Because it should seem that it may be self-explanatory, but once we're in the midst of it and we're feeling chemistry and attachment, it can be very challenging to know. And so this aspect of genealogical astrology is really looking at not just the patterns that we will play into our soulmate and karmic relationship from our parents, but it also really depicts that even if you just have you and your parents' chart, we can learn and be able to see which parent maybe represents more of the karmic lesson for you, and that being the one that you're going to repeat with other people. So it's fascinating because as much as all of us try to avoid heartbreak or relationships not working out, it's actually all part of our destiny as much as a relationship actually lasting.
You know, psychologically and even through the signs that I would encounter, I discovered very clearly that the individual that I had such a challenge with almost appeared like the reincarnation of the parent that I had the most challenge with. And so it only makes sense that the astrology of the parents would play in such a way. So as we're looking to be with someone and we start to look at these astrological charts, are we looking for people that are very complementary in our charts? Are we looking for people that have what we're missing in our charts? What does it really take in terms of the astrological perspective to have that divine union type of experience?
So in looking at that space of, okay, we've been through our soulmate, we've been through our karmic. I actually spoke to a woman earlier about this. Now we want to create space. What would the chart look like for this healthy, divine third love? And so the first thing that we would want to be mindful of is to make sure that we're not continuing to repeat patterns. So if we've had two partners who have the same rising sign that's potentially similar to a wound that we experienced with one of our parents, we would want to make sure that we're attracting someone new. The next piece is in looking at what is the chart of the person that you naturally attracted without knowing any other information. Because many times we will naturally attract someone who does have a different pattern than our previous ones, especially when we reach that level of growth. To be able to really look at and see, okay, this is going to be a significant person. The first piece is making sure that they're a different pattern than your past relationships. The second is being able to confirm that if you, let's say, had a wounded relationship with a father, that your current partner that you've attracted doesn't have a great deal of similar astrological placements. Meaning if your father has their Venus in Aries, your new healthy partner should not have his Venus in Aries. The third is being able to look at your Venus signs. Are they complementary, as you said? Doesn't mean they have to be the same, but do they bring balance to one another? And then the fourth piece is being able to look at and see if you have the same rising sign. Because how I describe the rising sign is it's almost as if our entire astrology chart is underneath the umbrella of what our rising or ascendant sign is. So two partners who have the same or very complementary, similar rising sign are those relationships which have a strong divine connection.
So a lot of people might be thinking, do I have to run around asking for people's signs?
You might want to.
You know, in the Indian culture, it didn't happen with me. Otherwise, maybe I would have avoided what I had, although I don't think I would. It just would have ended up in a different package. They actually look at that. They put together the astrological charts first. I don't know if they bring in the parental charts, but they definitely bring in the two people's charts to see how those would mesh. And so how does someone in today's world go out and date and not run around with a pad or get heady about, is this the right person? Do they have the right chart and the right signs? We're going to find out more about that from Kate Rose after these messages and a little bit more from her book. Dear one, the universe has always had your back, like remnants of a past life clinging onto your soul, or whether you have grown into appreciating the natural rhythms that it carries. Astrology has always been there. The planets and stars are undebatable. Something deep inside you knows there is more to love, more to life. Even if you have professed otherwise, you have never given up hope. You have never let your internal light become extinguished, no matter how deep the darkness that you walked through. You have become a warrior in these moments, not just for love, but for the truth. You know within the fabric of your being that you are meant for more, that love exists. And just because you may not have had love work out in the past, that does not mean it cannot happen in the future. This is from Kate Rose's book, Written in the Stars, The Astrology of Soulmate, Karmic, and Twin Flame Relationships. And while you're at it, you might want to also order her book, You Only Fall in Love 3 Times. Written in the Stars reveals the true nature of soulmate relationships. Contrary to popular belief, they do not yield the highest form of love. It also shares the essential lessons to be learned in karmic relationships and the incomparable fulfillment of merging with your twin flame. I invite you to find out more about Kate Rose by going to wordsofkaterose.com and seeing everything that she does, and also finding out more about her own Soul Gold podcast. We'll be right back with Kate Rose and Written in the Stars after these messages.
Voice America is on LinkedIn. Connect with us today.
Broaden your mind. Open your heart for a greater understanding of how to express your pure and authentic nature. Tune in and turn on 1111 Talk Radio. Simran, author, publisher, and life mentor, broadens minds and opens hearts to a greater understanding of life, consciousness, and humanity. 1111 Talk Radio is every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel. 1111 Talk Radio. You are not on a journey. You are the journey. You are experiencing itself.
It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed. VoiceAmericaEmpowerment.com.
Become a member of VoiceAmerica.com. It's easy, and best of all, it's free. Start out by going to our homepage or any of our channels and click register at the top. Once you've created an account and signed in, you can create your own custom library, opt into our newsletter, search by show, host, guest, or topic of interest, or browse millions of hours of content across all of our Voice America radio channels. Membership gets you more. Visit VoiceAmerica.com today to get started and tailor the listening experience to your taste.
You are listening to 1111 Talk Radio. Simran is an award-winning author, publisher of 1111 Magazine, powerful speaker of wisdom, and a life mentor. Find out more at IamSimran.com. Now, back to 1111 Talk Radio.
In astrology, your sun, moon, and rising signs are commonly considered the big three. But when it comes to the astrology of soulmate relationships, your sun, moon, Saturn, and Mercury are the most impactful. This is from Kate Rose's book, and it is filled with so much wonderful information. You're going to have to pick up a copy, just first of all to know yourself, but then second of all, you can discover all kinds of things about those in your family, your parents, and the ones that are your prospective lovers. Let me share a little bit more. Dear one, the universe always has your back. The reason that you have been attracted to certain partners, cycles you have had to work through, or relationships that nearly killed your spirit, is that they have all been a predetermined part of your path. These experiences have never been random, and nothing has ever been a mistake. Because there are no failures on this path of love. There is only you and the lessons you have learned once you reach your forever love. The unique astrology you were born with shows you what you are meant to experience and learn in this lifetime. This ancient code is a language handed down through generations of wise ones who studied the stars. Again, this is from Kate Rose's book, Written in the Stars, The Astrology of Soulmate, Karmic, and Twin Flame Relationships. You can find out more about all of her services and her other book, You Only Fall in Love 3 Times, as well as her Soul Gold podcast by going to wordsofkaterose.com, and that link is in the bio description. Welcome back, Kate. I do want to talk a little bit about, individuals that are prospectively dating or looking or happen to meet someone. How exactly do we then go about figuring out if this person's right for us? And in the passage I read that the Saturn and the Mercury are the most impactful.
When it comes to the soulmate relationship, Mercury and Saturn are very significant because with the soulmate relationship, one being so much of the choice to honor our truth and discover and take that path to figure out and learn who we authentically are apart from our families or social conditioning. Mercury governs the truth, but it also governs how we communicate that, how we are able to speak with others, our communication style, really representing the aspect of sacred understanding. While Saturn is known as the ruler of time and karma, and in the astrology chart really does represent our personal karmic lessons. So together, when we're looking at the soulmate relationship and how significant it ends up being, and usually often when we first enter into it in life, being able to speak our truth and begin that process of learning who we are, and that just because it might look good on paper doesn't mean that it's actually going to feel good to our soul. That's why Saturn and Mercury end up being so significant for us.
That makes so much sense because love really is about receptivity. It's about listening, and it's also about us being able to be ourselves. And those planets are so much about those particular parts of our authenticity.
They really are. And in many cases, even looking at soulmates, it's not uncommon to have the charts of two soulmates be almost identical, not only sharing the same Saturn sign, but having so many other similarities as well. And similarities can be wonderful to, let's say, get along at times, but you're also not really triggered. There's no catalyst of growth in those situations, unless, of course, there's some karmic ties over from our parents as well. And that's why on that journey, it really is about understanding ourselves more so that we can begin to understand more of what we need from love and life.
Well, and the karmic ties, the karmic relationships, not only have to do with our parents, but this is about generationally what's been passed through time, that we are
Absolutely.
also clearing this karma. And so when we are going through these relationships where we have to heal or we're dissolving some of that residual karma, that's actually something that's very good. It's supporting not only ourselves, but also our generations.
Yes, it's when we do that with the karmic relationship, it's not only healing ourselves and past generations, but we're also healing karma for future generations. Let's say, for instance, there was, grandmother, great grandmother, they got married when they were young to the people that they were supposed to. Perhaps they were soulmate relationships. They never got to go to college or choose their own self or figure out how they wanted to contribute to the world. And now you find yourself in a marriage, soulmate or otherwise, and you're in this situation, realizing that you have a choice to potentially stay and keep going on this path, but you also have one to change. And so by choosing yourself, by being able to go to school or support yourself or find what your biggest passion is, not only are you giving voice to what your grandmother and great grandmothers weren't able to do, but you're also changing the course for future generations, because now your daughter would potentially never question her self-worth over simply obligation.
And as young couples are coming together and they have children,
Yes.
how does knowing their own charts and their child's chart support them in doing the kind of work that allows their child then to attract someone that is better for them? Or is that all just written in the stars, that we all do have these things that we're going to have to go through and that it's no one's fault?
I do truly believe that we do all have things that we're going to have to go through, and that even in those moments, it is no one's fault, but it is part of the path that our soul chose for this lifetime. That being said, if you have two parents who both are aware and conscious, and they say, I want to be able to understand myself, my partner, and our child, we can do it. It might not always, let's say, be the easiest, especially if we find that potentially we are our child's karmic lesson, or something that we did is going to be something that they're going to have to heal. But it at least gives us that awareness to, let's say, show up more consistently, to make sure that we're speaking love into the child, that we're parenting our child in a way different than, let's say, we were parented. So even if it's just two parents with a baby, or maybe they're pregnant now, it would still be of benefit to run the chart for your child based on both partners, because you'd be able to see how both come together in that child's chart, what they might struggle with, as well as what strengths they might have and what might be part of their own purpose.
We've been through a really powerful time the last few months, and we actually have one more super full moon coming up in November. And I know that this period has been about a lot of release and true knowledge of the self and the love of the self, even to the point of a lot of individuation beyond those around us. And so it seems like this would be a really fertile time to work on relationships and also to let go. You have quite a few different moon rituals within the book of how to work with the moon energies in terms of our astrology and our relationships. Can you talk a little bit about how that affects and supports us when we do that?
Absolutely. The idea of the moon rituals is to actually be able to tap into the energies of the universe that are around you all the time. So even if you're not aware of it, or you haven't yet performed your own ritual, it's something that is always there supporting you. And I loved what you were saying about this time being so potent for release and even being fertile for new beginnings and for deeper healing with the full moon in Taurus that we're going to have later in the month of November, because it's also occurring around this time of Capricorn and Pluto being there for the last time in our lifetimes. So in being able to, let's say, look at the moon rituals, especially for release, a lot of times, although we need to make sure that we have the healing, again, that's that embodying aspect of our lessons, the moon rituals for release can really give us the closure that a lot of relationships can't actually give us. And with these rituals, we're also able to kind of send the message out to the universe that this is something that we're ready to move beyond, that we do know our worth, we have embodied our lessons. And so we're sending out a new energy, whether it's one of clearing away or releasing, or let's say even a new beginning on a new moon. For those romantic new beginnings where, let's say, we want to set an intention for what we want to receive, or even to keep growing a new connection, the best time to do it is really the new moon in your own moon sign. You can use any new moon, let's say, if you feel called to, but the one in your own moon sign is the most important, because it's almost like your own personal soul's new beginning.
And in regard to karmic relationships with the moon rituals, you write that this is about being able to set yourself free from everything that was never really a part of your truth to begin with. So it's not just about the love or the relationship, but the relationship is almost like a catalyst to support releasing the other things as well, yes?
Yes. I mean, these karmic relationships, we get enmeshed within what we're seeing and experiencing. So it could be, he or she never commits to me. They gaslight me, or I feel like I'm never enough. I never feel chosen. Those are common themes. But in reality, all of those feelings that we're having in that karmic relationship go actually back to the wounds that we had in our childhood or young adulthood. And so when we're experiencing that, we're feeling a lack of worthiness. We're feeling like no one showed up for us, or that we're not chosen. And so maybe we're not special. And so when we do that moon release for the karmic relationship, having embodied the lessons, it's that idea of we're not just freeing ourselves from this relationship. We're not just making space for new love, but we're letting go of all of those storylines and beliefs that were never actually authentically ours.
You write in your book, by learning your karmic lesson, you unlock your fate. You no longer work against yourself while trying to create the life of your dreams, but finally are in the place to co-create it with the universe. So that karmic lesson within a relationship is kind of like a key that unlocks the door.
It is, and it's the most intense. It's the most challenging at times relationship. Often the one where there's a greatest level of chemistry, which is really in place to keep us there so that we can learn these lessons. But having been through the karmic relationship and actually logically in our mind learning the lesson, embodying it into our soul, it truly is the one facet that we can do for ourselves and within ourselves that changes our entire life. Because once we have learned and healed those karmic lessons and wounds, we are not the same. And so life isn't the same. And at that point is when we actually really get to know who we are, and we see life with infinite more possibilities and hope, and we see more clearly than any of our wounds ever allowed previously.
Now, the way you've set up the book, you're saying that the soulmate relationship is really hinging on that sun, moon, Mercury, and Saturn. And you go into each of the signs and actually give us affirmations and describe what the lessons are, what the growth is in those experiences. And then in the karmic, you talk more about the South Node and the North Node. From my understanding, the South Node is something that we live through to a certain part of our life, and then all of a sudden the North Node kicks in. Can you explain a little bit more? Because if that's not correct, I want individuals to have the correct understanding.
Absolutely. So we are all born with our North and South Node in particular signs. The signs the North and South Node are in are always opposing signs. So they always travel together. So it would be, for instance, Aries and Libra, Cancer and Capricorn. So there is a relationship already between our North and South Node. Now, the North Node does represent our fate, but the South Node represents another aspect of karmic lessons, this time usually more generational, or what we were conditioned to experience or believe by our parents. The South Node is truly known as the place of the soul's undoing. And in that space, it seems that we are able to undo all that we were given, all that we inherited or experienced, so that we can step into the fate of the North Node. However, it doesn't just switch or flip. It's something that we actually have to choose. And the only way that we can choose the fate of our North Node is by learning the lessons of our South Node, which is usually what presents in the karmic relationships.
And that's quite powerful in the way you've laid it out, because you present an affirmation, a karmic affirmation, and you also present what that lesson looks like, what we have to grow into with each of the signs.
Yes, because they do have that relationship together. I am a firm believer in affirmations because how we speak to ourselves does determine our reality. With the South Node, though, being able to see, it's one thing to say, okay, I'm attracting partners who have their rising or so many of their placements in my father's South Node, or that was carried over from my father. But it's another thing to actually be able to understand what the lesson is and how that translates to the work that we can do for ourselves, whether it's becoming our own provider and protector, trusting ourselves. Obviously, worthiness is a huge one with the karmic relationship, but being able to understand and know the lesson, and then being able to have those affirmations allow us to be able to continually have that space of moving forward with knowledge and also a connection to our own soul.
It's really beautiful because oftentimes people think of maturity from the standpoint of how we age. And then you can also look at maturity from the terms of spiritual maturity in terms of how you handle things with emotional intelligence and mindset. But looking at it through the lens of perspective, it's almost as if, there's one type of relationship, which is really us being the child. Yes. Another type of relationship, which is us kind of being the adolescent puberty individual. And then the third type of relationship is when we finally grew up and we learned how to be in relationship.
Exactly. And that's why when I look at this journey of relationships and love, I see it more in the space of what we are evolving to, like what is the real evolution of our human selves in this lifetime, and it's through love. And so even though with that soulmate relationship, being so representative of, that child, what we were kind of taught was right and okay. And then that rebellion of wanting to find ourselves and break all the rules and do our own thing during the teenage years. We need those spaces because even when we get to that healing adult phase of the third love, the divine love, the idea isn't that we have then abandoned our inner child or teenager. It simply means that for the first time in our life, we as healing adults are actually the ones who are making the decisions and showing up. Our teenager and inner child will always be with us, but it's that they're no longer calling the shots in our relationships because they've learned that we can keep them safe, we can set them free, and we can be able to honor what it is that they need.
And you break these down in terms of calling them the undeveloped chart versus the developed chart. How does a person speaking to themselves or asking questions of themselves change in the undeveloped chart versus the developed chart?
So in the undeveloped chart, there is usually still a lot of unawareness over why are we doing what we're doing. Many times there is that childlike mentality, which is also often seen as that victim mentality of why is this happening to me? What's wrong with me? Why doesn't anyone choose me? Why doesn't anyone love me? When we're asking questions and thinking about terms of the undeveloped chart, we're seeing ourselves as powerless. Life is just happening to us in those moments. And because of those feelings, that's when we often tend to repeat cycles unconsciously, searching for someone to love us so that we can finally feel loved. Whereas once we learn those lessons and now we move into the developed chart, now we're actually able to use our astrology chart for the highest benefit. For instance, Venus in Virgo can present challenges and positives just as every transit. With the undeveloped chart, Venus in Virgo might be a perfectionist. They might come across as judgmental. However, in the developed chart, suddenly those aspects of negative traits now become transformed so that Venus in Virgo is now healing. It's healthy. There's no codependent tendencies. It's able to inspire others. So every placement in our chart does have the ability to actually work more for us. But the big part of that is being able to learn those important lessons so that we can change how we think, how we see the world. And instead of being powerless, we are empowered to be able to take up space in this world and in our life.
You really beautifully present different stories and scenarios of couples and charts to help bring all of this knowledge into a more tangible space to then look at our own. And as you moved through the soulmate relationships with Mercury and Saturn, the nodes in regard to karmic relationships, when you move into the divine love or twin flame relationships, it has more to do with the 4 elements. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, the elements are something that I feel like isn't spoken about nearly as much as it should, because it does have a huge significance over us. And again, this is that aspect of being able to know ourselves and understand. Many people will first identify with their sun sign, but the sun in astrology really only governs our external self. It's how people might perceive us to be, but not our inner truth. For that reason, we could have a, let's say, sun water sign being in Pisces. I'll use myself as an example. However, my leading element is actually air. Being and identifying with either a water sign or an air sign is drastically different, especially when we're looking at who would possibly complement us and even recognizing what strengths we have in our own life. The elements themselves, how I always explain it to people, is that they actually all represent an individual part of our own thought process. So, for instance, it's the air energy that allows us to have the ideas. The earth energy would come in and set the plans and put forth reservations and things like that. The fire energy is going to provide the passion and motivation to carry forth whatever you've planned, no matter what occurs. And that water energy is going to check in to see how you feel. For the most part, most people have at least one placement in every element. The biggest challenge occurs where, in those rare occasions, which do happen, sometimes people have an absence. Many times in the karmic relationship, we will actually see partners who, let's say, I personally have my greatest collection in air. My karmic partner had an absence of air. So while there's a certain level of complementary in karmic relationships, it more is that I'm going to use what you have because I don't have that. Versus when we're looking at this healthy divine love, we're going to see more complementary, healthy energy so that both people are supported and not depleted of any of their own elemental ideals and beliefs.
This brings about a whole different idea when it comes to balance, because we usually think of balance as external, or even finding a way to balance our energy internally. But this now brings about, there's another multidimensional element of balance that has to do with our cosmic energy.
There is, and I believe in so many ways that we can do things in our external life to achieve balance and perhaps even focus on our inner self. But in so many ways, the astrology speaks to what's always there. So by being aware of what's going on in our astrology chart doesn't only help us attract and be able to identify a truly healthy, aligned relationship, but we also better know what we need. For instance, as a leading air element, I know that grounding is something that is hugely important for me. So I am often found, no matter the season, walking around barefoot. That aspect of being able to know and learn ourselves from our astrology chart, it does help us in our romantic life, in our professional lives. But the most important aspect with the astrology is really being able, and the whole idea of love is first to see ourselves as the way that we want to be seen, so that then we're not carrying over an empty cup into any relationship.
Now, I've often thought of how we have both feminine and divine masculine energies within us. And I wasn't really ever considering that planets could be masculine or feminine. So can you talk a little bit about which planets are feminine and which ones are masculine, and is there a balance in between there? And with the new types of humans that are coming onto the planet, are they automatically becoming more balanced in their energy because we're moving forward as a species?
Absolutely. So the aspect of feminine and masculine planets is one that is fascinating. When the chart, and we're looking at the number of feminine and masculine energies in a person's chart, it actually refers to the signs that each planet is in. For instance, Pisces is a feminine sign, Aries is a masculine. They are often divided up evenly in the chart, with however many masculine and feminine are each associated with the zodiac signs. For these, it really ends up making a difference in knowing ourselves because, as you'd mentioned, humans are always seeking balance. So we might pull our chart and realize, okay, I'm a leading feminine energy, but we might actually come across as maybe more directed, more, let's say, masculine qualities. And it's because we're always searching for balance. But that does help us be able to learn how to approach life and relationships. With that aspect of the balance 5 and 5, it does denote a new world that's kind of coming in. Although at this point, the 5 and 5s could also be quite challenging because without a leading energy, it can be very challenging to move ahead in any direction.
My guest today has been Kate Rose, and we have been talking about her book, Written in the Stars. I may have had an arranged marriage that seemed out of my control, but it kind of seems like we're all arranged in one way or another when it comes to the stars. From her book, Dear One, the cosmos is always waiting for you to read the ancient code of astrology, like Braille on your heart that has been starved for hope, knowing that once you do, your soul opens to see clearly and choose differently. Because this is the truth of astrology, of the mystics whose ancient wisdom resides within the deepest part of you. Once you truly see, you can never be blind again. This is from Kate Rose's book, Written in the Stars, The Astrology of Soulmate, Karmic, and Twin Flame Relationships. She's also the author of You Only Fall in Love 3 Times. Find out more about Kate Rose and all of the things that she's engaged with by going to wordsofkaterose.com. Thank you, Kate, for being on 1111 Talk Radio. I am Simran. Until next time, in love, of love, with love, and as love. Be well.
Thank you for opening your mind to a new reality, your heart to greater compassion, and your experience of aliveness with 1111 Talk Radio. Join host Simran next Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern Time to step through the gateway of conscious living here on the Voice America Empowerment Channel. Remember, you are not on the journey. You are the journey.